Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 5 of the Catholic Catechesis podcast. This is the final episode in this series so far, and I have two very good friends of mine, a fellow theology major and a fellow soccer player, Maggie and Luke. Why don't you say hi, guys?
Luke, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Maggie. I am the fellow theology major, not soccer player. I am a senior at the University of Dallas and have loved getting to know Germ in that respect.
And my name is Luke Pelletier, fellow soccer enthusiast, and also major at UD. I'm a junior there. I'm privileged enough to get to know Germ through my 3 years.
Yeah, I've most of the people I've interviewed in this podcast so far, I've had an experience of being able to kind of get to be better friends with them over the Rome semester. Luke was one of my travel buddies over my 10-day, so that was fun. And Maggie has her own like little story where she had a partner, and then they just didn't book flights or hotels or anything, just went with the flow.
Yeah.
So that speaks to her courage. I could never do that.
Courage or just bad traveling. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's a pleasure to have you guys on. I'm glad y'all could come on and talk catechesis with me for a little bit. The podcast goes through 3 little sections. The first one, I'm kind of trying to touch on more personal experiences with your catechesis over like your I guess formation as somebody in the Catholic faith. So to start with, that's kind of the most basic question. Where did you get like your religious education? Did you get it like at your home, at your parish, maybe at like a Catholic school? But yeah, you go ahead and answer that.
Luke, start us off.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
So to answer that question, I come from a family where my mom was a theology major and my dad had a master's in philosophy. So they were both very, very devout Catholics, and I got a lot of my information because of that from the home. I actually learned. It was funny. I went to all Catholic schools growing up. So I went to St. Thomas More, Western Academy, which is an all boys Catholic school, and then I went to St. Thomas High School. And all the formation I received through those schools, I had received years before from my parents. A lot. It's just I didn't say for everyone, but just personally, I received a lot of it just in home.
What about you, Maggie?
I don't want to show too many of my cards, but I was homeschooled. So I received a lot of my religious formation at home. I had to do like first communion classes and confirmation classes at my church before receiving those sacraments, but all of my theology, for the most part, my catechesis was at home.
Right. What was the kind of teaching style like? So you said you had a parish kind of classes for your sacraments, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember the way that they kind of were taught, the classes were taught? Did you have like a little box program, like a curriculum was already developed for the teachers, or were the teachers kind of in charge of making sure that they taught like certain things?
It's a good question. I don't actually know how, like, whether or not they followed a set curriculum. I think that it was probably dictated by the spiritual religious education head at our church. But we had usually like a lecture by the religious educator, for lack of a better word, or the priest, and then we would go into small group and do some more discussion questions, and then there was a retreat, I think.
Right. Luke, did you have any kind of that?
Yeah. It was very very Socratic in my house. We always joke, but my mom would sit us down and she would say, okay, I am for lack of a better term, I'm a homosexual coming up to you and arguing about the faith. And of course, Joe and I would be like, okay, like, well, in the Bible. And she goes, well, I don't believe in the Bible, so you can't use the Bible.
Right.
That's
Oh wow,
awesome.
that's fun
And
scenario.
as 6-year-olds, it's kind of made us cry. No, I'm joking. But yeah, it was very fun, and I think it got us to think outside the box a bit. But yeah, that was a lot of our teaching. And we had a lot of dinner table discussions.
Hmm.
Was That's how it was taught to us. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd imagine growing up in a house with like philosophy and theology majors, the Socratic method was, very well ingrained in them, um, from their own formation. So
yes, whether we
that's really
liked it or not, it was good.
yeah. I've never heard someone like that. A mom was like, okay, let me throw some scenarios out there and make sure we have some faith warriors in this household. That's that's really
Awesome.
cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, it was good. It was good.
So how would you guys say that the way that you've been educated, like, right? Most y'all have said that, like, Maggie, you said you had your parish classes for your sacraments, right? But most
Hmm.
of your formation was in the home.
Hmm.
Luke, in a similar way. Would you say that this has influenced the way that you view the church in a way, like maybe if you'd gotten your education in another way, in another form, it would be kind of different?
It's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Luke, do you have an answer?
Um, I can take a shot in the dark. I would say, looking back, I wouldn't have gotten as much experience, or simply gotten that knowledge of my faith any other way than the way I did, which is through the
Hmm.
home. Specifically because I had the duality of learning the catechism from my schools and learning catechism from my home. I
Hmm.
I can clearly tell that personally, the catechism that I learned from my home was much sharper and deeper and hit me harder.
Hmm.
Maybe because it was my parents teaching me instead of like a teacher.
Right,
Um,
right.
but it was the way in which it was taught. I think was a huge way that
Hmm.
formed me. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, in a different manner, I probably wouldn't have gotten formed as much.
Hmm. Maggie, if you had a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah, I think that it helped me realize that it should be something faith should be something a part of like everyday life, and it's part of like who we are, rather than um, rather than something separate from like the home or yeah, I guess day-to-day experiences. Like it's a huge part of day-to-day experiences rather
Hmm.
than just something that happens every few years when you receive a sacrament. That was something that resulted from being taught at home, which was really really important for making my faith my own as I grew older.
Yeah, yeah, good answers, guys. It's a tough question, I know, because trying to put yourself in like, oh, what if I'd gotten this like differently?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's difficult to think about because you've only had it the way that you have,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, how would you guys rate your catechesis experience? Now, I know you're in your like it's mostly homeschooled, right? So I don't want you to think that I'm making you judge your parents. Like it's
Yeah,
like
don't tell
how
my
good are
parents
how
that
good
I'm
are my
reading
parents
Is
at
there a
teaching,
negative
right?
scale?
it.
But I'm gonna give y'all a scale, 1 to 10. How would you kind of rate your catechesis experience as a whole?
Take it away, Maggie.
Okay. I would say that it was probably, oh gosh, 1 to 10. Well, I'm not a saint, so I'm not going to say 10, but I would say it was, gosh, I would say an 8, maybe. I
Hmm.
don't know. I felt very prepared for my theology classes at UD. I think that
Hmm.
I was able to. I think I understood theology a lot from an intellectual level, like dogma, church history, all of those things. But I also think that I was able to develop it very personally as well from my education,
Hmm.
both from what I was taught and by example of my parents.
Hmm.
So I would say it was pretty good.
Yeah,
Not
that's
enough to
good.
canonize me though.
Oh, maybe someday.
Um,
Maybe someday.
Someday, hopefully.
okay, we can dream. We can dream.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Yeah, I would say 9 for me.
What did you
Um,
say? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Hello?
I would say a 9. a 9 for me.
What up, why don't you?
Yeah, no, nothing against Maggie, but personally, I've experienced her catechesis. No, I'm joking. No, I think just like looking kind of the same line as Maggie, like looking forward or looking back into my theology classes at UD, but also through high school and discussions I've had with others. Feeling very intellectually prepared to discuss the faith
Mhm.
is something that not many of Catholic teens and young adults have. Like
Mhm.
that's something
Mhm.
that and at UD there's obviously like a wealth of those people.
Right.
But before that, I mean, it was hard to find someone that would discuss. Most people just throw it away. So
Mhm.
just being able to intellectually defend it, um, and yeah, again, like what Maggie said, like make it my own.
Mhm.
Growing up is something that is in large part due to my parents and the upbringing I had. So
Yeah. I think a theme that I've had with these interviews is I'm finding that a lot of people that have their home catechesis, a very strong home catechesis, they mention like, yeah, I had a really good formation, right? I know the church's teachings and stuff like that. The theology is good, but they also the second part, which I think really makes the catechesis really good as a whole, is the fact that they see their parents doing it, someone in the
Mhm.
home, right? So
Mhm.
it's that somebody living that faith out is not. I don't in my opinion, I think it's worth a little bit more than the teachings. It's living the teachings, right? You can know the teachings, but if you don't live them, it's a you know, it,
yeah,
it
It
it's
seems a little
iffy.
hypocritical. Yeah.
It's iffy. But so it's like you're seeing those two like combined, especially in a home setting where you can see that each and every day. That's extremely valuable. And
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm glad that so many people, like some people that I know, have had that formation. Warms my
yeah.
heart.
The heart cannot love what the mind does not know. Philosophy.
Wow. That was very, very profound. Luke. Do you think of that right now?
Well, it
Yeah,
is.
I think it's
It's true though. It is
revelation.
very true. It's very true.
Revelation.
We
Yeah.
didn't mean to make
No,
fun of it.
very well said, Luke.
No, I think I forgot who said. I think it was either Augustine or
That sounds like an Augustine thing to
That
say.
sounds like an
it's,
Augustine
I
thing
think
to
it's Augustine.
say.
I know, yeah, I think it is Augustine. But yeah, just gonna throw out the quote machine.
Yeah, I'm gonna get my book out too.
That's why we invited you on here, Luke. We want your philosophy. Make it sound smarter.
Philosophy. It's okay.
All
Such a
right,
good
on to
point.
the second section. This is a lot more fun, I think, in my opinion, is because we get to hear what you think about the church, the things you never tell anybody else.
Well,
Bringing out the deep opinions in this section. So the first little question that I had is, I've prepared a couple of quotes from Saint Augustine's first catechetical instruction. Uh, I wish I had more documents and stuff to draw from, but all of my books are still in my dorm room because I couldn't
oh,
pack them up. Yeah, unfortunate, sad times. But I want you guys to kind of listen to the quotes and then tell me whether you kind of agree or disagree with what Augustine is saying in this book. A little bit of background on the book. It's Saint Augustine's reply to a letter that he got from another bishop that asked him for help um, in developing his catechesis and teaching the faith as a whole to his congregation. So it's written in a very distinct style. I loved reading it. I would definitely recommend it to anybody that wants to learn more on the topic. But the first quote that I kind of prepared for you guys is, "We learn in them what we teach," and this is referencing to the catechist, the person, the teacher, right? So he's saying, I don't think that the sentiment in this quote is more, we'll learn more from the students than we can teach them, but by teaching these students, we learn more about what we're teaching them, and we're able to, teach it better.
mhm.
Would you guys agree or disagree with that?
I think that you definitely learn a subject better when you teach it. You know what you really understand because you know whether or not you were able to put it in um, coherent words, and you know what
Mhm.
you don't understand. I mean, when I'm studying for a test, that's one of the things I do is can I
Mhm.
explain it to someone else? And if I can, then it's a good test of whether or not I know it. And that process of trying to figure out how to teach it is really a good learning process. So I would
Mhm.
definitely agree that you learn it better from teaching.
Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Repetition, repeating knowledge, brings new insight.
Hmm.
And just looking over again, like what you said, like studying for a test, like you reread what you learned. And in
Hmm.
teaching, you obviously have to reread what you learned over and over
Hmm.
again to teach it to
Somebody else, right?
students. So yeah, just I would definitely agree that
Hmm.
that teaching in and of itself is a kind of learning. It's a relearning of what you already know. I think
Hmm.
the best teachers will actually gain new insight every time they teach a subject.
Right.
Um,
I think that's true.
because you never stop learning,
Hmm.
in my opinion. But yeah, I agree.
Hmm. I heard it said from Patrick and Joe that they told me that that was kind of the big thing that they learned about this is that when they were catechizing at St. Luke's in Irving, was that like there's not really just you can use the same way to teach a variety of different groups, but it's you're never going to reach all of them in the same way if you try to bring a new approach to each group. Even though you're teaching the same material, adapting your approach to the way that this group is formed. Um, I don't know. Would you guys agree or disagree with that? That's another thing that Saint Augustine is a big proponent of: is the adaptability of a teacher to their um, students.
Yeah, I would say yes. Sorry, May.
No, go for it.
I would say yes. I mean, you look at to pull from the New Testament, you look at St. Paul's letters, and you look at St. Peter, and you look at even the Gospels. There's a variety of teaching. There's a variety of tools that they use to teach different, from the
Hmm.
Gentiles to the Ephesians to the, they're not teaching. Oh no, I mean it's the same message, but with
Hmm.
each group there's a distinctive, unique quality to it that you don't see in other
Yeah.
letters or
Hmm.
in other groups that they teach. And I think I mean, same true. I mean, even more so today, exponentially, because of the variety and the variability of everyone here on Earth. So I think it
Hmm.
it is a testament to the teacher that he is able to adapt his teaching style to first teach the same message, but at the same time retain a unique quality that the group will understand to whatever group he's teaching to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the process of I sorry, Luke, I like the way that you drew in the different kinds of teachings that we have, even from the church fathers. I think that was a um, really good point. But I also, in addition, think that the process of trying to figure out how to teach someone can be really good, and you learn the material better when you're trying to figure out how best to explain it, that whole process. But then I think the actual act of explaining it in a particular way can really lead to new insights because you're looking at it in a different light or emphasizing different things that might help someone understand. And I think I definitely think it's related to the last question too, just that teaching really does um, help you learn more. And the more you teach, the more time you spend with the Bible and the teachings. And there's lots of opportunity for revelation there. So you can always learn
Yeah.
more in that respect as well.
Yeah. Very well said. Very well said. Um, yeah. No. I think Saint Augustine was right on their nose when he said that. I see a lot of I've heard a lot from a lot of people that are in the position to teach is that that's one of the biggest problems that they have is that like the temptation to stick with that one thing that works and try to push it as far as you can
Mm-hmm.
instead of taking stock of each different group that you're teaching and then trying to modify your approach because it's a lot more work, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so St. Augustine advocating for that, I think, is very, very intelligent in that sense and ahead of his time because I think that applies even more hand today. Uh, uh, yeah.
And I think you have to know the subject really well to be able to modify the approach without changing the content at all. So I think that's another reason why modifying can really help you know it better because you need to figure out how you can
Mhm.
change it without actually changing it.
Yeah, yeah, very, very, very good point. It's a very good point. Good exchange, guys. I like those answers. On to the second quote
Oh,
from
come on, you say
the
this
document.
first.
uh, I think this is a fun one. St. Augustine says, in relation to correcting misunderstandings within, um, when some from a student, is to avoid arguing and refute with what has been foretold. I think the sentiment there is that, well, we're teaching the truth. These are the truths of the faith. It's not necessarily that somebody is a heretic if they go against it, but it's anything against the teachings is a misunderstanding of what is being taught. So it falls on the teacher. Their responsibility is to correct that and repeat and repeat and repeat and reteach the teachings until they like it hits home what they are. Uh, yeah. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
Could you? Sorry, I don't think I understand the question. Could you rephrase?
Yeah. Would you guys agree with Saint Augustine when he says that to avoid arguing, it says refute with what has been foretold. So that's scripture, church teachings, the way to like scripture and tradition, the two. Um, the word escapes me, but the deposit of faith, basically. Uh,
I'll
yeah.
have you start, Luke.
You're too kind, Maggie. um, yeah, it reminds me of the Supreme Court. Every time they have a case, they usually take from previous cases. They don't actually, in order to avoid
Mm-hmm.
any definitive, unique new, I guess, ruling that would divide and divide the country. They usually, I forgot the term of it, but they usually will take from previous cases and say, oh, well, this case, deals with the same thing. We're going to use this in this
Mm-hmm.
case as well. Um,
Right.
Now, I mean, tangentially, that applies, I think, to what you're saying um, is that to enact what has already been foretold. If someone brings up a question, be like, well, Jesus said in the gospel, I think he explains it what you said and the church document, and then you can just keep on going because there's which I don't think a lot of people understand, is a wealth of information on a multitude of Catholic and Catholic
Mm-hmm.
doctrine, starting from Jesus and then moving on through all the church fathers. So you can actually draw a line in a lot of cases from what Jesus taught and then what the church fathers have said on that,
Mm-hmm.
all saying the same thing, and you can just repeat that. Look, this is what has been said in the past, and we've continued and this is church dogma, and we've continued that for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about drawing on what other people have said, I definitely am all for that. There is a ton of wisdom and truth in what a lot of the past saints and obviously the Bible says.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to remember that. Let me know if this is not answering your question, but I think it's important to remember that while there might be new questions or I guess there's definitely new scenarios and new circumstances, we're not actually
Right.
teaching anything new. Like nothing we're
Mm-hmm.
saying is really new. It's just, I guess, a different way of saying what has long been said for, thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think drawing on what other people have said can be really helpful and making sure that we're not giving any like new information or new doctrine, but just sort of
Mm-hmm.
expanding off of what they have said.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I think Saint Augustine is really concerned with teachers trying to take things into their own hands and explain by themselves like the truths of the faith, which
Mm-hmm.
it's not. I don't think it's a bad thing. If you know what you're talking about, you should be able to explain things well in an argument. But for people that are not as trained, say like maybe volunteers that show up to teach Sunday school, if they get a big question from a student, they run the risk of not saying the correct thing because if they try to kind of freeball it off of their own knowledge. And so I think Saint Augustine is exactly like you said, Maggie, is advising anybody that's teaching to rely not really on their own kind of knowledge and skill in answering a question, but in what everybody else has said, the scripture and the weight of tradition that the church holds. And yeah, like also to touch on what you said, Luke, there's a wealth of knowledge there, right? It's a lot of people that have thought about these things for a long, long time. So the questions, I guess, aren't new, but the the way that they're asked, I think, evolve from generation to generation, and so there has to be a different way of answering it. Another kind of nod to adaptability. Um, yeah.
I don't think I'm ever going to disagree with a quote from St. Augustine, so but I'm glad that I'm here.
Yeah, it's not really my place to disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you're well within your rights to hold your own opinion. But yeah, when
I'd
coming up
rather hold
against
St. Augustine's opinion.
St. Augustine, it's probably better to hold his. All right, and next question. I'll give you guys a little explanation of the development of catechesis over the historical period of the church. I'll try to condense it as much as possible so it doesn't like run a long time. But basically, what we have is in the early church we have Saint Augustine, and we have also a figure called Saint Cyril of Jerusalem. So they were the two big kind of authorities on this subject. And Saint Cyril had 23 lectures that he would give over the course of like someone's formation period. But before you could even enter into one of these things, St. Cyril mandated 40 days of penance, full stop, no exceptions for any students. And I'm just going to say, like, if that was, I can't imagine anybody going through a 40-day
The
penance
students
period.
had to do penance, or the teachers?
No, the students, before they
Oh.
could, like, enter into the community, into this kind of learning experience, they had to do those 40 days of penance. And then each session, each lecture was condensed, was consisted of an exorcism first before anything, a reading from scripture, a homily on scripture, and then prayer. Um, Now, obviously, I think this is formatted to the early church community because this is a small community that still faces a lot of opposition from a lot of other bigger, more powerful temporal forces, right? Um, so you have to make sure. I guess it's a really like lengthy, weighty screening of people to make sure that they're coming into this community for the right reasons and not just because of something else, right? Uh, I don't want to say making it difficult to get into church, but making it definitely worth your while to enter. um, but as we progress and the world keeps getting bigger, the church keeps growing. In medieval times, it's not that the quality of education is like not is like thrown out the window, but the quantity. Like, how do we get all of these new people, this like the growing populations of these countries to get into the church? Because now it's almost impossible to give that same sort of quality education that was possible in that smaller community to this larger community. And so that's where you get kind of the emphasis on making sure people knew the basics and getting them baptized, and then outsourcing kind of the formation of people to the home, to other places outside of the church community, because there's so many people that they couldn't really make sure that they could give a very quality education to everybody. Uh, I think we see this in the missionaries with Saint Gall and Saint Boniface. They followed the Augustinian method, but they tried to get as many people as possible to convert, um, instead of going on and on about the deepest parts of church teaching, I guess. And then finally, I think the biggest example of this in modern times is in Vatican II, is that we're trying to bring back that quality of the early church had with the small communities, and then also the world's not getting any smaller, even more people than before, right? So they're trying to find that balance, that synthesis between those two schools of development. I think a great example is the RCIA process. I don't know if you guys are familiar with anybody that's ever gone through it, but it's quite similar to the way that the early church would induct people, right? Is a long waiting period of before you can enter formation, and then there's a long period of formation. Um, the question here is, do you guys kind of sympathize more with one school of development over the other, or do you think that the church should keep on going, trying to find this balance, or do you think that that's not possible? I guess in this world. It's long, I know.
You got this one, Maggie.
I think RCIA is a great program. I think that that's a good balance. I think what Augustine and Cyril, has he ever been pronounced Cyril? No.
Might be Cyril.
Oh.
Might be Cyril.
Okay. Well, Saint Cyril, Cyril. I don't know. I'm just wondering if it's the same guy I'm thinking of.
Saint Cyril.
I think that was. I am sure that it brought in really great and serious people into the church. But I guess my fear would be that would scare some people away, that they, some people who could have been serious about the faith still, but just not willing to do, 40 days of penance before, which I think is reasonable. So I think that I think they've done a good job of, there's still classes and there's still a lot that you have to do, and you have to take it seriously, and you have to think of a sponsor and whatnot, to sort of set the example that your parents might not have. And I think that's a great way. I don't think there's necessarily a perfect system. The best system is just going to be, I don't know, I think personal development of faith. People are just serious about it or they're not. But I think that RCIA is good. I think it's a good solution. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. So yeah, I think it's fine. When I kind of tried to put this together, I was like, well, I mean, is it really possible to find that? Do we keep working to find that balance, or do we just kind of go back to one of these schools of development and try to push that as much as possible? Just kind of thinking about that. Yeah, because Vatican II is obviously an imperfect council. A lot of its documents are very, very vague, leave a lot of like room open for interpretation, which is good in a sense. It's opened a lot of things up for the church, but it also has
a little dangerous.
has done a lot of things that maybe we shouldn't have done. And it's just like, do we continue with that? Do we kind of try to keep doing this follow the spirit of Vatican II? Or has it caused more damage than the good it's done to the church, right? I don't really hold an opinion on that. It's something that I've thought of a lot. It's just like, what is the good? When does the good that one thing has done outweigh like the possibility of bad? But yeah, Luke, you have anything for us on this?
Yeah, as a non-theology major, I don't know how much my opinion holds. I think that there's a lot of good that the RCAA process has done and that Vatican II has done. I know Vatican II has caused some tension in the church, because
yeah,
the extent of which is, it's caused tension. I think the synthesis is a good idea because people are saying we should go back to our roots. I think are ignorant of just the times. Like I think it's just impossible. But I do also think that you should put the reverence for the sacraments and the reverence for the Eucharist and the reverence for the Mass as I mean, because JP2 famously said the Mass is the source and summit of the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
And it should be seen and revered as such, because it's the Eucharist. So I think the synthesis is a good idea. Now, how well that's done, I think just the area that RCA is done in through all these countries, cities, there's going to be some that are better than others, obviously. But I think overall, it's done a good enough job for the Catholic faith. But I think also, coming back to our first couple questions, it puts even more of an onus on the family to foster that catechism.
Part of it, yeah.
And I think that's where the struggle is going to be. Is not whether the RCA program is good, but it's whether these families are fostering good catechesis or not. So.
Just want to butt in again real quick. I like going off of what you said, Luke. I think that was really good. The church and RCIA and the programs that they have, they only go so far, but they're only made to go so far. Like they can teach everything that they should, and the church definitely should teach and have lessons and classes and whatnot. But as far as serious, who takes their faith seriously and the reverence that an individual has, that's their individual decision. And I don't think it's the church's job. I don't think that the church should structure classes to to try and ensure that, because ultimately they can't, they can't make sure that a person is taking their faith seriously. That's their own personal decision. And as imperfect as that is, because we are imperfect, I think that's all. The church can only go so far,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good sentiment. I think the church can only go so far, but I think Jesus can go a lot farther than the church.
Oh, for
You
sure.
know,
And he does.
Yeah, and speaking of the church, and kind of staying on the theme of documents, something that I've noticed in my class is that as we've studied like church documents that have been released on the topic of catechesis, we did a little kind of mapping thing. So we put all of them like in a little Google Doc, and we went through and we like did information about each document. Something that I noticed was while I give these councils and bishops time to work on these things, right? These things don't come about like this. They're not really quick fixes. But there's a long spaces between these documents. Some of them like 10 to 20 years between documents. Considering how fast the world has moved, I think. Would you advocate for more frequent kind of church documents on the matter of catechesis nowadays? I believe the last one was a national directory that was released in 2005. Um, don't quote me on that because I don't have a lot of material here, but
Wait, Karen said 2005. Never mind. Okay, that was a bad joke. I think. Sorry, was that the question?
yeah, no. The question is that should the church documents be more frequent instead of leaving so much space in between? Now, since we live in such a fast world,
I think that it's certainly a struggle because the world does move at a much faster pace than the church, and that can pose a lot of issues. But at the same time, trying to get the church to work on the world's time might not be the best, just because there's a lot of prayer and time that needs to take place in order for things to happen the way that they should. That being said, is there something like, could we go a little faster? Probably. A little bit more on top of it. Yeah, I would think so. But at the same time, realizing that I don't know if that it would necessarily be right for us to be completely or to do things all. I think we should caution against going all too frequently and moving too quickly.
Okay, Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think again, I don't know much about the church documents in that regard, but I think what Maggie said is right. I think there's prudent thinking and prudential action are key in this and moving forward like that, especially with the church documents and church catechesis is paramount.
Yeah, good opinions, guys. I wouldn't say that I disagree with you guys, but I do think that some of the things that aren't addressed, for example, a big gaping hole in a lot of these documents is an understanding of the role that technology plays, maybe not only in education, but also in the lives of people today. Obviously, it doesn't feel like it, but 1990s were 30 years ago now. That's a long time. And for example, one of the documents that I really had in mind when I was thinking about this was one of the last documents written by the USCCB on youth ministry, which was late 90s. It has almost no mention of the role that technology plays. It's like, oh, it's there, but it's not really that important. I mean, 2020. I mean, we're looking here at each other. Technology has become extremely important to the world as a whole. And I think to go that amount of time without reconsidering and rethinking the way that the world is changing and how we can minister to this world is it's not I don't want to say foolish, but I do think it's letting that go a little bit too much.
You definitely know more about the issue than I do, for sure. I mean, the documents and the need. I'm not pastoral ministry. But what would you think about smaller communities making that decision for themselves. What role should technology play? Do we need a document from the church saying that, or can we make decisions based off of the needs of our own communities?
No, that's a good question, and I think it's something that that should be posed. I think I and for a lot of smaller issues, I would definitely agree with that. I would definitely say a lot of parishes, like maybe like in the location of the world, like say for like in the recent news, the Amazon Synod, right?
Mm.
That's a very specific area of the world with very specific needs, and I think that should be left to them to figure out, um, because they know their needs and their as well better than anybody. But going back to the topic, technology is a lot bigger than just a certain region or sector of the world. It touches all of us and reaches all of us in a way that probably nothing has ever done in human history before, besides maybe the faith, right? Um, so I think for the topic to be for that kind of big topic, I think definitely that the church should look at that as
Although,
entity.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Although it's not a matter of church doctrine or anything that the church is founded upon. So although it is impacting the whole world, it's not as if someone makes a decision that technology should play a role in catechesis in some way or another
Mm-hmm.
is going to affect the integrity of the church teachings or whatnot.
Yeah, no, it's also a good point. Yeah, no, it's a really good point actually. It like you said, it doesn't touch a lot of the church teachings in a way that kind of makes it a priority maybe for the
Sure.
church to touch on. Like maybe like like modernism is probably more pressing than a lot of these other ideologies that maybe Pius XI or something touched on in their encyclicals in the early 1900s were much more of a threat to kind of the church, I guess. I don't want to say threat, but like affected the church in a lot bigger way um, than maybe technology does. No, I think it's a question definitely that should be pondered. Uh, but yeah, so Luke, if you have anything to add.
No, I'm just listening. It's good. Discussion.
You're welcome to contribute at any time, Luke. We
No, yeah.
call you philosophy major.
I mean, Jesus was an Android user. That's all I gotta say. So
so you're still stuck on the Google Pixel phones, huh?
Samsung.
Samsung. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
And the last kind of question that I had for this section is another thing that I've kind of thought about a lot myself, is that should the church require its catechizers to be professionals, quote unquote, maybe not with a degree, but definitely with some sort of training certification? Or should it continue to encourage volunteers in their parishes and local kind of areas?
Luke, hit us home.
I would say that again, a synthesis. I think there has to be some sort of, you can't just like, hey, I want to volunteer, but I don't know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there has to be some sort of knowledge, but I think volunteers um, are key. I think that if we just had these trained, I don't think enough people would teach. So I think there are teachers out there that are good and have the knowledge, but I think like, hey, like making sure you know this, and this is just some basic things would go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very good sentiment. It's been expressed a lot in a lot of the interviews. Is that the energy that volunteers bring is not something that maybe a professional would. Like they've been working at this for a long time. It's just kind of their job, so it's just kind of not seen that way as like this sort of thing that requires um, uh, like passion. I guess it's just like a job. You're not defined as like, oh, I'm doing this again, right? Um,
Oh yeah. And I think obviously trained teachers. Excuse me. Trained teachers that to teach the catechism would be ideal, but I think volunteers are much more useful tool because they when you volunteer, I think it's almost you have this passion for it. Basic training, just making sure they know what they're talking about. So making sure they know.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah. A little technical difficulty there.
Yeah.
Just had to refresh the page.
So I missed what Luke said, but I'm sure I agree with whatever it was.
No, Luke made a really good point.
Yeah, he said that Eucharist is just a symbol. I think we should use any bread we want. No obligation.
He needs to take some classes.
Luke is a strong advocate of using whole wheat bread instead of the white for the wafers.
An important question.
It's much more healthy. All right, no, thank you guys a lot for that input on that section. And now let's move on to the third and final one. So this is where you get to play helper, Mr. Fix-It, in a sense. You get to suggest anything that you would like the church to do differently, more of, less of, depending on whatever your point of view is. So the first question here is just really basic. What does the church need to do better in catechesis?
Oh, sorry, you can hit this one up.
Yeah, I figured you were going to say that. I think a lot of the issue, and I don't know if this is necessarily answering your question, but I think a lot of the issue is with the catechesis that happens at home. I think that needs to happen better, because that's really where the kids, the people who are learning, all of us, that's really where they're going to learn the best. It's good because they're going to see the example and they're going to see it in day-to-day life, in practical, in the every moment, everyday experience that it should be. So I think that's really what needs to change. And that can be certainly promoted by the church. It can't be mandated in any way. But I think trying to emphasize the importance of the domestic church, and maybe offering more classes for parents who don't really know as much about the faith as they want to, or something like that. I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Yeah. What about you, Luke? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the domestic church is under siege, under attack. I think building that stronghold up again, is something that will strengthen, the whole church, because we are all the mystical body of Christ, and it's not the church that we go to, it's the families that go to it. So I think, if those are weak, then the body is weak. So, making sure, like we said, classes are paramount, and then again, I would say strengthening the theology classes at Catholic schools. I think making sure that those are, because too many times I would go to theology classes and be super basic, and the teacher wasn't really teaching it with a lot of zeal. He was just kind of reading off the slide, and it's not just another class, in my opinion. So I think those two things would be, in my opinion, would be something that could be worked on. So.
Those are great points.
Totally agree with both of those. Like Maggie, you touched on something really, really good, is that a lot of parents might not know the faith as well, to be able to teach their children. And that's, I think, that's a problem that runs down generations, right? So if like parents when they were kids didn't get anything from their parents because their parents didn't know, and then so on and so on, to at some point where where was the break, right? We have to go back and maybe not go back and find it, but we realize that there was one at some point, right? And that's why some people are having so much trouble passing it on in the family, right? Luke, I also really liked your point on the Catholic schools. I think Catholic schools play a great role in continuing formation, although like just based on their role as kind of trying to educate everybody and everything, right? It's just like being like going to a normal high school. They don't play as strong a role in catechesis, but I think continuing formation is definitely a big part. Especially because if you're doing it like for like confirmation classes in high school outside of your high school, outside of Catholic high school, right? You go back there. Once you've learned all these things, you know the basics from your parish. You get the bigger, deeper ideas in your theology class, which I guess this isn't happening nowadays. in a lot of Catholic schools, which is why I totally agree with that point. That we really got to touch that up. You gotta do more in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on to the next one. It's a nice little fun one. I'll give you guys a little bit of power. You're Pope for a day. What changes are you doing, or making, or doing? Like, what actions are you taking to improve catechesis in the church? Or do you think that that's not the role of the Pope to do? Like, that's up to you.
If I was Pope for the day, I think our biggest problems wouldn't be with catechesis in the church.
Yeah, whoa, come on. Woman Pope?
Carefully.
Yeah, we're touching the line here a little bit, but we're not going over it. We're not making anybody Pope. We're just metaphorically doing it.
Luke, assuming that you would be elected Pope before I, how about you start?
Nice transition. Well, first of all, I would order the best cooks in Italy to come. Gotta get that secret recipe. No. Well, I would say catechesis. I don't know. I would say the thing is, I don't know how much power the Pope has. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Pope does not do that. I'm glad my video is off. But
it sounds not.
I don't know. I think to call the bishops together and because it's not the job of the Pope. The job of the Pope is to instruct the bishops, but to get all the bishops together would take a certain amount of time to do, which I think would be longer than a day. But I mean, just to give out like a I don't know. I think there's not much I can do as a Pope in a day to improve catechesis. Besides getting like sending out an address to the nation, to the world. And that's the extent I can do is, hey, like bishops, like I encourage all of you to, strengthen your catechesis within your own parishes and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, to call like a synod or to call something like that would be
longer than a day.
Yeah, longer than a day. So might as well just enjoy the Vatican food.
I think what I appreciate the most about that answer is just how fixated you were on the time frame of your reign as Pope. Like, well, I can't do this in a day, so I'm not going to do that in a day.
I want to take some pictures with the Swiss guards, right?
Yes, the Swiss guards are great. You can talk to the Swiss
play
guards.
around with the halberds and everything.
No, they probably don't speak English, or maybe they do.
Maybe.
You could teach them. You could teach them in a day.
Exactly.
There you go. Maggie, what do you think?
Okay, well, all oddness aside, and yeah, I think, and this might be overlooking the one day thing a little bit. I think that I would try to appoint a council to try and discuss the issue and address it a little bit more. I think the Pope's job would be more to make sure something was happening and less to be making sure exactly what that was or what that looked like, because I think a lot of things would depend on, I think that should be more up to the bishop of a diocese to oversee that, because he can do so much more. He has so much more. He knows the people in the community better. He's I think that falls under his purview a bit more. So I do think it could certainly be something that the Pope oversees and makes sure is happening. And maybe appointing a council is doing that. But I think a lot of it would be more up to the bishops.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really good answers, guys. What I've found is that a lot of people think that, and maybe it's just I don't know, an effect of growing up in the American society where we outsource things to the states right from the federal government. A lot of people don't think that the federal government should have that big of a role to play in the life of a daily American, right? But I do agree with the sentiment. I think the Pope can say a lot The Pope's words obviously carry weight, but at the end of the day, he can't go into each and every community and make the fixes that each community needs. That's up to the pastor of each parish, every bishop of each diocese, because they know their locations and regions and the problems that they face a lot better than the Pope does. Yeah, no, very really good answers in that sense. And yeah, so let's move on to the final question. It's a good one, I think. How do you guys think the church can increase the amount of teachers in catechesis?
Okay, I can answer this one first.
Wow.
Volunteer. I volunteer. No, I think increasing teachers in catechesis involves first of all, I mean, I hate to say the word marketing, but you have to market catechesis and realize that you do need more teachers. And if, spread the word that, hey, we need teachers. That's number one. And then number two, I think with this upcoming generation with us, I think inspiring the generation to teach. Make it so that they not simply know their faith, but they love their faith. I think too many people, I mean, I forgot this stat. I mean, y'all probably know this stat better than I do. It's like over half of half of teens that get confirmed within 5 years or not, like no longer practice the Catholic faith. It's like that, like 60%. It's some crazy number.
It's actually higher than that.
Yeah.
I think the number lies around the low 80s.
I haven't gone to mass in like 2 years, but that's not the point. So
It's not about you, Luke.
Not about us, Luke.
But yeah, no, inspiring this new generation to love their faith. And I think tying in everything together that is bringing, with all the different facets of technology, with all the different facets of social media, and all those distractions that it brings, but also all the good that it can bring. I think inspiring people to take that as the good would be a huge step in bringing more teachers to Catholic catechesis, not just today, but in the future.
Well said. What about you, Maggie?
I think it's sort of a circle of, if you increase and make better the catechesis, then you'll probably get more teachers and whatnot, because I do agree with Luke. I think it's a vocation, it's a calling. And so the more inspired you are to take your faith into your own and to make it your life, the more likely you are to do something like be a catechizer. And so I think that, wow, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. I think that definitely once the catechesis is improved, that will certainly have a circular effect. But and I think he's right. I think things like Seek and those sorts of conferences, I think those can be really, really helpful, because you see how alive everyone is, and it's sort of an emotional connection. It takes you, but it's a fire, I think, that can live beyond that retreat, and I think that can get more.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think that a lot of the trouble is that it's not really a moneymaker, and a lot of people are worried about the practical, like what their job is going to be, and I don't know how much that can change or whether or not it should, but I think that's a lot of the issue. So inspiring people and helping them realize that it is a vocation, and perhaps theirs might be the best we can do.
Yeah, well said. I also think another component of this is the fact that maybe the role of a volunteer is looked at as an extra responsibility in life. It's like this extra burden to carry on your back. It's like, oh, now I have to go teach these kids on Sunday, as well as working my 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and raising my family and blah blah blah. So it's like a lot of people don't want to take that on, and they're like, yeah, well, like why should I do that? And I think the answer to that actually comes from Patrick and Joe, who I interviewed earlier this week, when their sentiment was, they're like, yeah, we definitely have those thoughts when we go, like, we have to go like talk to more like 15, 16-year-old teenage boys, which I think, Luke, I don't think you would disagree with this statement. 15 to 16-year-old boys are probably the most difficult people of any to get to do anything.
Oh yeah,
So
it's hard.
it's
Until
it's
now,
definitely
it's hard to get
a
me to do
difficult
anything.
job. But they said it's like all of those sentiments, all of those thoughts, once they got into that classroom and they saw their students in their class, all of those thoughts went away because they were now put in that environment where they realized their own the calling was to teach the faith to these guys. As difficult as that might be, is not paying attention or whatever. Um, they didn't have those concerns of like this is a waste of time anymore, and they left leaving a lot more fulfilled. And I think that's something that flies under the radar in the marketing of it, Luke, is that it's a personal, like a very fulfilling personal experience if you let it be for you, um, going and teaching the faith to others. Because as we've said before, when you teach something, right, you have to know it, and then through teaching it, you get to know it even better. And so that helps increase people's love for their faith, and as a whole, on their own personal level, will be much better in that aspect than maybe they would be if they didn't, take on that that job. Um, but how do you make it seem like lesser responsibility to people, right? I think Maggie, you touched on that very well. Is that the practical element to it is like it's not a moneymaker, right? A lot of people have to worry about putting food on the table before they can worry about teaching someone else's kids about the Catholic faith, which is unfortunate, but it's a truth in the reality that we have to face as a church. Um, I think unless you have you anything to add on the matter?
I think that you have
No,
great insights. Yeah.
no. I mean, I've had a lot of great insights, but I mean, Maggie's had some. It's okay.
All right, so that is going to conclude this episode of the Catholic Catechesis podcast. Moving forward, I'm going to see if this is a sustainable thing that I can do. Right now, it's just for a school project, but this has been a very fulfilling experience interviewing all of my friends and getting their insights on this topic. Maggie, Luke, thank you guys
Thank
so much
you.
again for coming
Yeah,
on
thank
and
you so
sharing with
much.
me. Um, y'all stay safe out there, man. This world is crazy. Praying for an end to this quarantine so I can go outside and play some soccer, Luke.
Oh yeah, same here. But yeah, y'all
Thank
stay
you.
safe. I'll be praying for
Yeah,
y'all.
you as well.
All right.